we just welcome everyone, and we hope that a few more join, but you'll get the best information because you're here on time. We're happy to have you all join for this month's town hall meeting. It's being recorded so others can view it later. And we have these meetings every first Thursday of the month. I'm Kay Nelson. I'm one of the members of Conserve Utah Valley, and others are joining, and others are around on the other side of the world today. We try to keep this meeting under a half hour, and so in order to keep it under about 35-40 minutes, if you have any questions, will you please write them in the chat box, and our moderator Carolyn will help with the Q&A at the end. Our next town hall is September 2nd. Our guest speaker will be John Curtis, who represents the Utah's 3rd Congressional District in the United States Congress. And prior to this service, he served, he was the 45th mayor of Provo and served 2 terms. So on September 2nd, he's going to be, he's going to address conservation efforts with Rock Canyon and the Bonneville Shoreline Trail. So we're excited that John Curtis is going to be with us on September 2nd, and we'll get the word out more about that. In conjunction with our September's town hall, we're organizing a Conserve Utah Valley hike on the Bonneville Shoreline Trail on September 11th. This is a Saturday, and more details on that will be coming too. If you're registered with Conserve Utah Valley, you'll get that info, and you'll hear more at the September 2nd town hall. We'll also be having a new brand launch for CUV that night. So there's lots of exciting things coming. Just as an introduction for those of you who haven't joined us before, we are Conserve Utah Valley, and our vision is to do one thing: we save land and water forever. And we love this vision, and we're working hard at it. Our mission is to build a network of active volunteers in Utah Valley who are engaged in learning more and speaking up on issues that are vital to conservation. So if you aren't already registered, we would love for you to go to conserveutahvalley.org. Is it .org or .com? Carolyn? .com. And register.
Definitely it's .org. Sorry, that's a typo.
Oh, okay, it's .org, and register, and you'll get important updates, especially for when we need help, when there's something critical. So yesterday, today's topic is about Utah Lake. And yesterday at UVU, there was a wonderful symposium about Utah Lake with several hundred attendees. And I was a part of the planning process on this, and it was amazing to see a group of people come together, scientists and interested parties and experts and just citizens who wanted to be a part of pulling this symposium together. A lot of people worked to make it happen, but the true force behind it was Ben Abbott. And Ben is a professor of aquatic ecology at BYU, and he grew up swimming and water skiing on Utah Lake, just like I did. He and his wife Rachel and children go there often. So we want to welcome Ben and thank him for all he did to host a wonderful educational meeting yesterday. And tonight, we would love for him to share some information that he shared yesterday. We're gonna do it by asking him some questions. So I will ask him 3 different questions. He can speak for quite a while. He is our guest speaker tonight. We're not having him share time. The first question is, what was the lake, Utah Lake, like 200 years ago?
That's a really great question, Kay, and thank you for having me. Conserve Utah Valley was one of the organizers of the symposium, and I attribute a lot of its success to your involvement. So I've been thrilled to see the growth of your organization, and I haven't yet registered, but I'm going to go do that right after this call. Okay. So I have some slides, and I'm happy to either show the slides or just answer the question off the cuff.
We'd love to see your slides.
Okay. I'm a college professor, so I'm super boring. And so of course I have slides. Let me see.
Nothing yesterday was boring that you said.
Okay. Just give me 1 second. And I think I can. Sorry. The share just had a little glitch on my end. Let me try one last time. Basic screen share. Oh, did we lose it again? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and there's a slide presentation, I think, that's up.
Okay. It is glitching on my side. I'll try one last time. If it doesn't work, that's fine. Oh, I see. I think the problem was that I had it open twice.
It was very close to being perfect the last try.
Okay. Third try is the charm, right?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Uh-oh. Yesterday we had pretty good luck with the technical side of things. Today it looks like we're not. So I think
it actually looks okay on my end. I can see your slide.
okay. I can't. It is just going flashing on my end, so I don't. I'll probably just stop. I'll probably just stop the slide share. Sorry, you guys.
That's okay.
Never had issues before.
We'll be just fine.
Okay.
That looks good now.
I think that I finally got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just wanted to, if you want to get the full story, go to utahlake.byu.edu. There's an article that all of the people on the screen contributed to, where we tried to compile the best available information on Utah Lake, its past, present, and future. And there's 73 references that we link to at the end. We tried to not have it just be speculation. There are plenty of things about the Utah Lake system that we still don't know, but we wanted to summarize everything that we did. So take a look at that when you have time. What was Utah Lake 200 years ago? That was your question, right, Kay?
Yeah.
I'll get to that, but let me talk about a little bit of what makes the Utah Lake system unique today. There's several attributes that make it quite vulnerable to human disturbance. This is a map of Utah Lake and then also its watershed, so the area of land that drains to the lake. It has an enormous watershed. It's almost 3,000 square miles. And so anything that happens in that watershed, whether it's a wastewater treatment plant or an urban development or agriculture or a wildfire, that affects the lake. And there is enormous pressure for water on Utah Lake. About 85% of that water use is agricultural, and more than half of that agricultural water use is used to grow alfalfa, which is then, of course, not eaten by people, but fed to livestock. And much of it is actually shipped internationally, including to China. Then we have incredibly fast growth going on in the watershed right now, as all of you know, in Conserve Utah Valley. And there is a population that doesn't understand the lake. I'll address that in a little bit. There are some major threats that Utah Lake is facing, including that aspect of people don't know about the lake or don't care about the lake. And they're associated with that growth in population. There are development projects that have been proposed that are universally considered as dangerous for the lake. I don't say universally casually. Usually there's disagreement in the science and management communities, but I'll circle back around to that as well. And while the growth is going to happen no matter what, if we're not smart about it, it could be really dangerous. And finally, we're facing climate change, which is disrupting precipitation. When the water is warm, algal blooms can develop more quickly, and wildfires that have doubled since I was a child. Looking at the whole Western United States, the area burned each year has doubled since 1984. That transport sediment and nutrients and other things to the lake. So this is just a graph that shows changes in snowpack. So now I finally got to a place where I can answer your question, okay? I put together these top 10 misconceptions that people get wrong about Utah Lake. And the first two talk about the history of the lake. So let's answer these. This first one, there's a misconception that Utah Lake used to be deep and clear. In reality, Utah Lake has always been shallow. Our valley is a Horst and Graben geological feature. It's flat at the bottom. On top of that, Lake Bonneville, this large Pleistocene era lake, covered our whole valley. I love to look at the map, right? So this shows the shoreline of Lake Bonneville, and almost all of us we would have been underwater if we went back 15,000 years. And so that deposited sediment that created a flat lake bottom. So despite what many people believe, it was never a deep lake. It also likely has always been cloudy. Now, not as cloudy as it is today, but there's several aspects that create the cloudy and I think beautiful color of Utah Lake. High rates of evaporation cause formation of minerals that give it that color. And because it's such a huge lake, the wind can quite easily stir up the sediment. Now, there has been an increase in cloudiness because a loss of vegetation around the lake and actually in the lake. There's evidence that there used to be macrophytes or plants growing from the bottom of the lake over much of it. The introduction of carp in 1883 had a huge change because the carp are bottom feeders that stir up the lake sediment. And then also nutrient pollution has caused algal blooms. So the lake wasn't certainly was not like it is today as far as the exact color and how long in the year, but it wasn't fundamentally different either. So the second question that also deals with what it was like 200 years ago, there's a common misconception that nobody lived here before the Mormon pioneers. And in fact, this area has been inhabited for at least 10,000 years. This is just a little timeline that shows the original Clovis people, the Fremont, Numic peoples. That's a language family that includes many of the tribes and nations that we would recognize today. And the Timpanogos Nation was the group that was most dominant for much of central Utah, and their culture really centered around Utah Lake. You can learn about the Timpanogos from themselves at their tribal website, timpanogostribe.com. And then all of that was going on, thousands of years of history, and finally Utah Lake was the Mormons arrived in the 1850s. And for a few years, there were good relations with the local indigenous peoples, but just 3 years after Fort Utah was built on the lake, on the Timpanogos River, now known as the Provo River, there was the Wakara War and then the Black Hawk War, which finally led to many atrocities and the relocation of the Timpanogos to the Uinta Valley Reservation, which had been created by President Lincoln just a few years prior. This is a picture of the current chief executive of the Timpanogos, Mary Murdoch Meyer, who we were really blessed to hear yesterday. And I encourage you to take a look at the recording. There's a live stream version that you can watch now, or in a few days we'll have a big one. Okay, here's another misconception. Utah Lake is broken and it's an ugly lake. And so let me just do a whirlwind tour of what Utah Lake does for us, all of us in Utah Valley. It is crucial for regulating climate. It's a source of precipitation. Also, if you look at how much the evaporation on Utah Lake cools the local air, it's amazing how much of an effect that has. So it makes our winters have more snow, our summers be cooler and more moist. It provides water for the communities all around the lake. It is crucial habitat in the Great Basin. This is an oasis. 35 million birds come through Utah Lake every year, and there are more than 10 million fish that live in the lake. It removes nutrients and other pollutants that we put into the lake freely and permanently. It protects our air quality. Areas that have not ensured water flow to their lake have had the dry lake bed create sources of dust and other pollutants. it is a world-class tourist attraction. I did postdoctoral research in France and visited Lake Geneva several times. Utah Lake is very similar to Lake Geneva, but we haven't treated it that way. And then finally, Utah Lake has very important spiritual and cultural significance. Yesterday, again, from Chief Executive Meyer, we heard her talk about the role, its importance for her people. Utah Lake saved the Mormon pioneers in their first years in the valley. The abundant fish from the lake fed not only the pioneers in Utah Valley, but they were shipped all over the Wasatch Front. We're more familiar with the story of the seagulls and the Mormon crickets, but Utah Lake is the unsung hero of those first years. To the question, or to the misconception that it's ugly, these are some pictures that were entered in our photo competition. Utah Lake is stunning from any angle. Here's some views from different times of day, night in the day, in the morning, in the evening. It's a beautiful water body. Utah Lake is stunning in any season. Really gorgeous. If you have not been there, go out and visit it. Here's a misconception I hear all the time, that the lake sediment is polluted and it needs to be dredged. And I should actually pause, Kay, because did I answer your first question satisfactorily?
Yes, and right where you are, my next question is, what is the current ecological status of the lake? So I think you're going right into my next question.
We're on the same wavelength.
Good timing.
So the reason why many have proposed that the lake needs to be dredged is because they don't understand the current ecological status of the lake. So there are two studies that have come out just in the past few years. These are completely independent studies that took lake cores all over the lake. They came to the same conclusion. Most of the sediment in Utah Lake is fine. So this graph's a little bit easier to interpret. The areas that are green or blue, the sediment has background levels of phosphorus in it, so natural levels of phosphorus. The one area here that was revealed is Provo Bay, which does have elevated concentrations of phosphorus and other pollutants as well. And you see this a similar pattern over here, an analysis that used slightly different methods. So many people believe, hey, there used to be Geneva there. We used to dump raw sewage into the lake. The lake is incredibly resilient, and most of the lake bed is in good shape. There hasn't been this massive accumulation of pollutants or nutrients. I'll get over to a little bit more about the current state here for number 7, Kay.
Okay.
I often hear that people don't care about Utah Lake, and there are some very vocal voices that say, hey, it's a stinky, toxic puddle. Why should we be spending money on it? What we saw yesterday was about 200 people there in person, another 200 who tuned in on the 2 live streams that we had available, legislators from all over the state. Our community cares about Utah Lake, and this is a really important opportunity because it's not only those who want to conserve the lake who have noticed it. There also are proposals. It's caught the eye of developers with money from Dubai and other places who are interested in completely transforming the lake. And so I wanted to talk about 2 proposals that threaten the lake now. The first one is this lake restoration solutions. I put a question mark on there because I'm not sure how this is either restoration or a solution, but it's a for-profit venture to dredge the entire lake and build 30 square miles of artificial islets all across the lake. Now, they're promising to solve all of the problems that are facing Utah Lake. The algal blooms will be gone. All the invasive species will be gone. It's going to be deep. It's going to be clear. People will come from all over the world to visit it. There'll be soda that comes out of the fountains, right? It's just, and the best thing is it's not going to cost taxpayers anything except the transfer of 30 square miles of lake bed to this company and the permission to do whatever they'd like with the entire lake. So I mentioned before, I've spoken with nearly 100 experts everywhere from limnology, the study of lakes and rivers, to geology, to environmental engineering, to economics, to law. And this is very rare, but I have come across no one who thinks that this is a sound proposal. Even those who I do not agree with on most things have said, you know what they are planning to do is drastic. It's at least 10 times larger than any similar project anywhere in the world. And they have not demonstrated a mastery either of the ecology, the science, or the engineering associated with the lake. So I think this is an existential threat, not only to the lake, but because the lake supports all of Utah Valley through precipitation, climate, biodiversity, it is a threat to our whole valley. And so I really hope that we can keep this on our radar. Now, there's another proposal that's called the Utah Lake Authority. And this is a different thing. It's a new legislation that was proposed last year, or in this last legislative session by Brady Brammer. It was patterned after the Inland Port Authority. Publicly, it was said that the Utah Lake Authority was not advocating for the Utah Lake, the lake restoration solutions. I'll just call it the Island Project. However, we heard from many people that they were open to that idea, and that the Utah Lake Authority would create an appointed body with taxation power, with funding and regulatory power that could potentially push a project through like this without much involvement from the surrounding communities. And so I actually am ambivalent regarding the authority. For me, it all depends on what the bill looks like. It's currently under revision. It'll be proposed again in January. It all comes down to, is this an inclusive proposal that allows community input? Is it going to be based in science and evidence? Or is it going to be just a way of railroading irresponsible development, including within the lake? So we care about the lake, as do others. And so we need to be really careful. I hear all the time from people who believe it's not safe to either visit or recreate or fish in Utah Lake. This is completely untrue. Most of the year, the lake is completely open, has great ecological status. We go down to the Utah Lake at least 10 times a year. If you go to utahlake.org, there are dozens of ideas of things to do around the lake. And if you are worried about the current status, check out the Department of Environmental Quality. They have up-to-date information when there are occasional closures. It's really easy to get confused about this because when the lake closes because of an algal bloom, it catches a lot of headlines. When the algal bloom subsides, usually just a number of days or weeks later, nobody wants to cover it, right? It's not as exciting. So many people think the lake is closed year round. In fact, it's usually only a couple or a few weeks in the summer. Utah Lake is getting worse. That is not true. In fact, I believe this is one of the Nelson's family. The current status of the lake, habitat and biodiversity are increasing. This amazing downlisting of the June sucker is a huge success that all of us should really celebrate. That just happened this year. Water flow to the lake has increased. In the 1930s, it was common for Utah Lake to dry out because of mismanagement of the water flowing to the lake. That has not happened for decades because of improvement. We now have water flow to the lake year round. Algal blooms are decreasing. This is news to most people, except for a couple areas in the lake. And the public is becoming more aware of the lake. However, the usage of the lake, the visitation of the lake is very, very low. And I see that as a problem because if people are not connected with this ecosystem, they'll be less motivated to protect it. So this is just a result from Sinead Tate in 2019. A similar study by Carly Hansen found the same thing. It used satellite data. Areas that are blue are where there is a decreasing trend in algal blooms. This is both the extent and intensity of the algal bloom. However, you'll notice in these areas where the wastewater treatment plants and urban runoff comes into the lake, there is either no change, that's the gray color, or an increase, the green color. So we still need to do more. However, much of the lake is improving because there has been upgrading of the wastewater treatment plants since the 1950s. There's been restoration of water flow, removal of invasive species, lots of things going in a good direction. So does that answer the second question, Kay? Do you want to give me the third one?
The third one is, what are the challenges and threats facing the lake? And I think you touched on that a little bit, but would you expound on that?
Yes, absolutely. One of the challenges is people think nothing is going on and they get frustrated. They say, hey, I see that Utah Lake has these algal blooms. That didn't used to happen. Janice Brainey from Utah State University showed us yesterday at the symposium that go back 100 or 200 years, you didn't have these algal blooms. That is kind of in this urbanization period since maybe the 1950s or even 1970s. So people see that, they want it to get better. They don't know about all the work being done on the lake. And so I can just do a whirlwind tour. There is large scale carp removal that has removed 75% of the biomass of the carp. And now they are working, that was achieved in 2018. Now they're working to maintain carp at reduced levels. If you're interested, look at Chris Kelleher's work. There has been restoration of the river deltas around the lake. These are pictures from Hobble Creek, which didn't used to even flow to Utah Lake. It was completely diverted. There was a culvert that went into the lake. Now there is amazing habitat for fish and birds, great access. There's an ongoing project at Provo with the Provo River Delta restoration. And this is a slide from Melissa Stamp. And it's her slide that actually shows they have tours that you can sign up for. It is really cool to go down there and see what is going on. There also are citizen-led projects associated with Utah Lake. The Utah Lake Research Collaborative, led by Aaron Jones, does these large events. Lots of good things going on. But the threat to the lake, these last two address the threats. The number one threat is this island project. It is an existential threat to the lake. It could happen quickly. They want to start dredging last year. If you look at the original timeline, it was planning to start in 2020. Here are some reasons why this is bad. The reason why Utah Lake is not covered in algal blooms all year round, if you look at just the nutrient concentrations in the lake, it should be. It's classified as hypereutrophic, the highest nutrient category of lakes. However, it's naturally cloudy, like I mentioned. That slows the rate of algal growth. It's naturally shallow, which prevents the worst effect of blooms in two ways. When blooms happen, as they decompose, they draw down the oxygen. That can kill all of the fish, invertebrates, and other things in the lake. That doesn't happen in Utah Lake because it's constantly being mixed by the wind. Also because it's shallow. When things go hypoxic, when they don't have oxygen, the sediments can release tons and tons and tons of different pollutants. So that's not happening now because the lake is shallow, large, and cloudy. Also, sorry, we got a visitor here. Also, evaporation and the lake bed are constantly removing nutrients and pollutants. I won't touch on this last one, except that people do care about the quality of life here. How is the lake project going to affect these things? It would make, they're claiming to make the water clear. They're claiming to make the lake deep. They're claiming to reduce evaporation. And they're proposing to completely change the ecosystem that we care about and love, that we've depended on for decades and millennia. So it's a horrible idea. There also this feeling of apathy. There's a widespread belief that there's nothing we can do to make the lake better. That couldn't be farther from the truth. I just wanted to read Chief Executive Meyer's words. Utah, I ask that you please take heed to what the experts opposing this project have to say. Our people and the reeds around this lake give you your name, the name Timpanogos. We stand in favor of restoring the lake to its natural beauty, but have to oppose privatizing and desecrating this historic sacred site. We are at a crossroads right now. This is the Valley Visioning 2 maps. On the left, you have the default development trajectory. Any of the areas that are the darker orange are expected to be developed by 2050 if we just allow the suburban sprawl to continue like it has up till now. However, look at the right. This is a completely different picture. There still is growth, so that the orange areas are either new development or redeveloped land, but it is concentrated in areas. It's a mix of high density, medium density, low density. It has the same number of people. It actually has more economic growth. It has less pollution. It has less traffic. This is, and I really encourage you to look through these scenarios. The Valley Visioning project, I think, was an excellent multi-year project that finished. It's up to us to choose. And we need to be communicating about what we want and what we don't want in the future. And so I'll just leave it here with a few recommendations of what we could do to improve the status of Utah Lake. Some of them are technical things like restoring river flow, decreasing pollutants. Some of them are community-based things, encouraging more recreation connection with the lake. And with that, I just wanted to really thank you for your time. And again, apologize for the technical problems I had.
No worries. Thank you. And it sounds like education needs to happen, that people just need to understand more about the lake, and what can happen, what the future holds. And if we screw it up, we can't easily fix it. If we're thoughtful going forward, then we can make it a wonderful thing, or keep it a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to, it says Craig Christensen, but it's Carolyn. And she has a couple of questions, I think, that have come in maybe in the chat box. So Carolyn, do you want to ask a question or two?
You bet. I think we've got some good ones that were submitted ahead of time, but we also have a couple coming right in through the chat. So I think I'll start with this one. I think it's a great one from Ian Peterson. He says that if any ideas have been discussed to encourage the use and therefore interest in the preservation of the lake, he's heard of the potential of dredging it to make it deeper and clearer. But besides privatization and commercialization, would dredging be worthwhile, and is it being seriously discussed outside of commercialization?
Yes, that's a great question. Dredging is being considered outside of the Island Lakes project, but there are two important caveats. It's difficult to get permitting to do dredging, right? There are 3 federal laws that often require at least 10 years of environmental impact evaluation. Also, remember that slide that I showed, most of the lake sediment is not polluted. And so in fact, what you would do when you're dredging, you're removing the natural community of microbes and invertebrates that live in the lake bed, that are the lungs and liver of the lake. So dredging, the reason why it's so highly regulated is it's a very destructive intervention. It should only be used as a last resort. The place that has most seriously been considered to do dredging is within Provo Bay. That's where many of the wastewater treatment plants discharge into, and there is accumulation of some pollutants there. So it may make sense if there was a properly permitted and scientifically based proposal to do localized dredging. The other thing I want to point out is Utah Lake is 150 square miles. That's larger than any dredging project that has ever been done. So we sometimes fall into this, hey, I dredged the pond behind my house and that solved the issues I was having with reeds and stuff. Utah Lake is not a pond. It's the 3rd largest lake in the Western United States. It's not something that we can just try things out with and see how it goes. We need to be really careful, deliberative, and evidence-based in all of our management.
Thank you for that answer. I think, Kate, for anybody who is wanting to stay on, there's a few more questions coming in. And Dr. Abbott, are you good to go until about 7:45?
I am, yeah.
Okay, so we'll keep with these questions and the ones that were pre-submitted until about 7:45. So keep the questions coming, folks, if you have more. Ian asked another follow-up question I think is also excellent. He says, how is it possible to improve river flow to the lake? Are there more rivers like Hobble Creek that are not currently flowing into the lake but that could? Yeah,
excellent question. So we have a limited amount of river runoff, right? We can't affect that except by addressing climate change. And that's something we need to be talking about. But let's assume that we have a set amount of water flow. Again, like I said, 85% of that is diverted and used for agriculture. Sorry, are you getting a lot of noise here?
No.
No, you're okay, good. There is a pilot program right now called water banking, which would allow farmers, if they don't need the water in a given year, to return it to rivers. This is how much of the water has been restored to Utah Lake currently. It's not creating new water, it's simply giving more flexibility to farmers in how they use it. So it's updating the law. That kind of cooperative agreement is a win-win. Right? The farmers then they're not constrained and not wastefully using water. They don't want to do that, but they will if they have to, if they're required to. So that's one of the most promising ideas. The other one is we need to really think about changing what and when we grow. So alfalfa is an extremely water hungry crop. It's only marginally valuable economically. And so this is a controversial statement, I really recognize. I think that we need to have a talk as a state and discuss, does it make sense to continue subsidizing the most water intensive activity that we're doing? But again, that's controversial. I only bring that up here. I usually don't bring that up in groups of farmers and with the water community.
That makes sense. Okay, we've got two similar questions on the same topic. There's often been a discussion of a bridge or a causeway crossing Utah Lake. And so one part of this question is it seriously being considered from east to west that you know of? And if we did build one, how would it impact the lake?
Yeah, great question. We heard from Jamie Barnes, who leads FFSL. I'm not going to remember it. It's the governmental group that regulates the lake bed. And she did discuss that in some of the development, not the Islands project, but some of the development trajectories, there are one or even two causeways that are described crossing the lake. Now, they have not been built so far, not because of environmental pushback, but because they're so expensive. And the only way that that UDOT would be able to do that is by having a toll road. And there's nothing that Utahns hate more than the idea of a toll road. So that has sunk this idea several times when it's come up in the past. Causeways are extremely destructive. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Great Salt Lake. A causeway was built across the Great Salt Lake, a railroad. It completely changed circulation within the lake. It ended up creating some of these low oxygen zones that I was describing because there was no longer mixing and circulation throughout the lake. That resulted in the release of methyl mercury to the highest concentrations measured anywhere on Earth. So when you are cutting up and dividing these giant ecosystems, there are unexpected consequences. And so there are so many alternatives to building a causeway, right? Look to that, the vision with the mix of high density, medium density housing, of smart growth, instead of just allowing marginal developments all around the lake. Why don't we preserve some of those agricultural and undisturbed areas? So we only need a causeway if we build in places that require a causeway. And so again, I know that's a difficult proposal, but I think we need to be having those conversations.
Thank you. Okay, so next question. I think this will be our last question based on time. So Josh Bauer's asking, how much do pollution and algal toxins spread about throughout the lake? So to be more specific, how much do problems in Provo Bay affect recreation and ecosystems in the rest of the lake?
Great question. The algal toxins are really complicated. So they're actually produced not even by algae, but by cyanobacteria. And sometimes you can have an overgrowth of cyanobacteria and no toxins. Other times you can have a few cyanobacteria and they're producing a lot of toxins. So that, and the state, thankfully, that DEQ website that I pointed you toward, it tells you the actual concentration of the toxins, as well as the cell counts and other things. When there is a localized bloom, you do not have long distance transport of those toxins. They break down quite readily in the lake water, both by ultraviolet degradation and other things. So if there's a bloom in Provo Bay, you still can go visit Goshen Bay or the Lincoln Marina or other places. Check for the actual area you want to visit. If there is a lake-wide advisory that's been issued, then don't get in the water that day. But if it's just one part of the lake, there's not a risk if you're in a different part of the lake.
Thank you. That was a very efficient answer. So I think we have time for one more question.
You sound surprised that I gave an efficient answer.
No, I'm not surprised at all. I'm just happy. Okay, so there's another great question from Ian. He says, Provo's Mirror recently addressed water issues and mentioned that a substantial amount of water in Utah Lake is lost to evaporation, and exploration is taking place to prevent that. Yeah. Is that a good idea based on what was mentioned about the lake regulating temperature in the valley?
Yeah, thank you. And that almost made my top 10 list of misconceptions. People think of evaporation as a waste. In the water cycle, nothing is wasted. That evaporation is the source of the downwind snow. So we would have substantially less water flow for our soil, for our rivers, for everything if we reduce evaporation on the lake. It is not a solution. And likewise, it would reduce the nutrient removal capacity of the lake. So any of these proposals that say, oh, we're going to reduce evaporation, they're counterproductive. What we need to do is reduce consumption of the water upstream of the lake. And again, that's mainly an agricultural question. However, if you look at that 15%, that is domestic and municipal, it's outdoor water use. And so the number one thing that we can do is change our lawns. Don't water them as much or transfer into something else that's just as beautiful or even more beautiful, right? Native vegetation that doesn't require us to irrigate it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for answering the questions that have come in. Kay, we'll go back to you to close things.
Oh, Ben, thank you so much for doing round 2 today. Yesterday was amazing, and I hope people will go and look at the symposium. It's long, but it's very informative and educational, and that's what we need. We need people to become informed and educated about the lake. So thank you so much for giving of your time again tonight. And thank you all for being here. We appreciate you coming. And if you could spread this message and go on conserveutahvalley.org and see, I think tomorrow we'll have this portion, this town hall, the recording posted so people can watch it. But you know, the more we are educators, all of us, we need to be out there and we need to be spreading this information and giving, even to the mayor, we need to make sure that we're giving the correct information so that it's out there and we're not in the dark about it. So thank you so much. And hopefully we'll see you next month with John Curtis, who will be speaking to us at our next town hall meeting. So thank you all for being here. We appreciate your diligence in furthering our vision and our mission with Conserve Utah Valley.
Thank you for all you do.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.